life, wisdom.
So we've all heard the saying, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid," which originated from the Jonestown Massacre in the late 1970s. And this is actually an area where you've done some research. Can you share with us what you discovered?
Sure. And it's actually kind of a convoluted story. There's a lot of steps to follow. And there's all different points you could enter into the story. One of the books I read was Jonestown, CIA Mind Control Experiment. And it was a very thick book, very well researched with some slightly fantastic thoughts in it, plus a number of other books and documents that I all pieced together. Mm-hmm. So Jim Jones was an American-born guy, a civilian, who became a kind of amateur pastor, preacher, started a small church, and moved around the country a little bit, ended up with what he called the People's Temple in Ukiah, California, mm-hmm. which is north of San Francisco. And according to the background information, in all the lead-up period to forming Jonestown, he actually was working with the CIA in several different South American programs to destabilize governments, to flip the political system over and so on. So he had actually been working for decades with the CIA. So then he sets up Jonestown, and there he is in Northern California, and he's thinking to himself, I need to move this whole operation somewhere. And when you hear the Jonestown story, you just know that they were in the jungle in South America. But you don't stop and think, well, wait a minute. How do you pinpoint a location in the jungle of South America? How do you select it? Mm-hmm. So it turns out that it wasn't a random location in the jungle, where some guy had a blow dart or something. It was actually a well-engineered, well-developed place with a landing strip already made, because it was a CIA training site for Green Beret operatives for operations in Angola.
Wow. And so then it just happened to be the same location that he decided to move his...
Right. So then the question is, how would Jim Jones know about that? How would he negotiate taking it over?
Exactly.
Well, there's a guy named Phil Blakey, who was a arms dealer, probably part of British intelligence, who kind of brokered the deal and did all the pre-construction and upgrades and so on, so that he could all of a sudden move all his people down to the jungle in South America. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting fact just in and of itself, and shows you, wait a minute, this is not just a random location here.
Right, and then knowing that he had the previous experience working with the CIA in general, and then that this location is also prior CIA use.
So before they all moved down to Jonestown, there was a series of articles in the San Francisco newspaper, which was owned by William Randolph Hearst. And in this series of articles, it was quite critical of the People's Temple and saying, it's kind of a scam and there's something suspicious about it, and mm-hmm. they're doing this and they're doing that. And so while all this was kind of brewing, 3 months before the Patty Hearst kidnapping, Patty Hearst's boyfriend, Stephen Weed, was seen at the People's Temple in Ukiah, California, walking around with Jim Jones, according to one of the survivors of the mass suicide at Jonestown. So just keep that in mind. So all of a sudden, one day, out of the blue, the Symbionese Liberation Army, the SLA, which is a group of 9 or 10 people, attack Patty Hearst's apartment, where her and Stephen Weed are. Stephen Weed's knocked out with a rifle butt. There's actually gunfire. She's abducted, thrown in a car trunk, taken away. And she's held in solitary confinement in a closet for 42 days, wow. During which time she gets sleep deprivation, obviously sensory deprivation. She's raped. There's a lot of control of how much she can eat. And there's mock FBI raids where she thinks the FBI is coming and gunfire is going to start and she might get killed. Can't remember. I think she might have been hooded, but there's a whole program conducted. And subsequent to that, she participates in a bank robbery as Tanya. Mm-hmm. She has this new identity of Tanya. Mm-hmm. Where did she get the identity of Tanya from? She got it from Donald DeFreeze, who's the head of the Symbionese Liberation Army. And he was a petty kind of street level, kind of high school dropout, black guy criminal. So how did he learn all these techniques for how to create a new identity and get the new identity to participate in a bank robbery.
Right.
Well, he learned that from Colston Westbrook, who did his master's thesis at the University of Berkeley on Ebonics, which is black lingo, which I have a copy of. So I've got social security number, his place of birth, his name. He's a for real guy. And he worked for the United States Army in psychological warfare operations during the Vietnam War. He came back to California and went into Vacaville State Prison, where Donald DeFreeze was being held because he'd been arrested, formed the Black Cultural Association as his cover, and worked with Donald DeFreeze and gave him his code name of Sinkyu, and designed the seven-headed cobra logo of the Symbionese Liberation Army. Subsequent to that, Donald DeFreeze one day walked through the laundry out of Vacaville State Prison and was free. Just escaped without any kind of helicopter or tunnel.
That doesn't raise any eyebrows.
Yeah, he just walked out one day. Then he joined the Symbionese Liberation Army, captured Patty Hearst, and
you think that the reason that Patty Hearst was the subject of this kidnapping and mind control was because she was the daughter of William Randolph Hearst, and
there's several probable possible reasons. One is I don't know,
right.
But the other is Jim Jones had a big beef with William Randolph Hearst. And so if he captures William Randolph Hearst's daughter, now he can ask for $1 million back to let her go. And what it in fact did was negotiated, because the Symbionese Liberation Army was quite left-wing, for the people, all that. He negotiated a food relief deal for poor people in the Bay Area, financed by William Randolph Hearst, as a condition of letting Patty Hearst go. And then what happened was Jim Jones got his people from the temple, plus some homeless people, and they set up 3 or 4 or 5 food drop-off points. They used the money to buy the food. They would take the food to the drop-off point. Then the Jonestown's people would go to the drop-off point, posing as poor street people, get the food, take it back to the distribution center. So the same food was circulated around multiple times. And so he appeared that he gave away this huge amount of food, but he only had to buy a little small amount. So he scammed some money out of William Randolph Hearst.
Wow.
And before William Randolph Hearst could finish negotiating a deal for his daughter to be let go, they all kind of took off. There was a big shootout. Most of the Symbionese Liberation Army died in a fire that took place as part of the shootout, sort of like Waco. But Patty Hearst and several others were kind of on the lam for about a year. They were finally captured, and she was taken to jail. And during the trial, the 4 expert witnesses who testified on her behalf said that she was a victim of quite sophisticated mind control, brainwashing programming, which is why she robbed the bank and why she had the identity of Tanya. And why would the daughter of William Randolph Hearst need to rob a bank to get some cash?
Right.
It obviously doesn't make any sense.
Plenty of money.
And before she was captured, 0 drug abuse history, 0 criminal history, no trouble with the law, model student.
And interesting that you mentioned that her boyfriend around that time was, later to reveal to have been hanging out with Jim Jones.
So he was already somehow tied in. So that was all part of the setup.
Oh, my gosh.
And him being knocked out was part of the cover deal. So who are the 4 experts who come and testify on Patty Hearst's behalf? Martin Orne, top secret cleared MKUltra contractor, Manchurian candidate expert, equals an expert on creating new identities for use in operations. Louis Jolyon West, also MKUltra top secret cleared contractor. Robert Lifton, who wrote a book based on his interviews of downed Korean pilots who had been brainwashed in the Korean War by the communist Chinese. So he was an expert on Chinese mind control, brainwashing expert type stuff. And Margaret Singer, who also interviewed those pilots. So 4 experts on military, CIA brainwashing, and communist Chinese brainwashing techniques all came and said, yes, Patty Hearst has been brainwashed by this basically uneducated street-level criminal. So then we're back to how did he know all that? Well, because Colston Westbrook taught him all that.
Right. So this is the CIA's way of, or potentially, of hiding the fact that they're doing this, and they're going to blame this guy and say that he's the one who mind controlled her, when really he's probably just a front.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that she's just a criminal.
Right.
And somebody somewhere apparently bought that story.
Uh-huh.
So eventually she got pardoned by the President of the United States and released and let out of jail. She's written an autobiography in which she says that Donald DeFreeze was obsessed with Colston Westbrook, talked about him all the time, and was very convinced that he was a government agent. And she says that Donald DeFreeze told her that Colston Westbrook gave him his code name of Sincu. So that's independently Patty Hearst's story. So then we go back to Jonestown, where there's all this kind of murky connections with the CIA. And so there was the mass suicide at Jonestown, and there was also a shooting at the Jonestown airport, where Leo Ryan, the U.S. congressman, was killed at the airport. And exactly who shot, why, is fairly well known. It's one of the Leighton family members, and the Leighton family was kind of like the administrative hierarchy of the People's Temple.
Okay.
But Leo Ryan, I have a document from the deputy director of the CIA to Leo Ryan, a letter, confirming that the CIA was in fact conducting drug experiments on prisoners at Vacaville State Prison at the same time that Donald DeFreeze was there.
Okay.
And that would be under MK Search. I forget the sub-project number, but one of the MK Search projects, and the drug was Pemeline. And Leo Ryan was investigating CIA operations in general, mind control in general, and was proposing to try and get legislation enacted giving Congress total control and oversight of the entire CIA budget.
Wow.
So there'd be no more black budget. And so then Leo Ryan goes to Jonestown, and lo and behold, the high up in the administrative hierarchy employee of Jim Jones, who's a CIA contractor who's been walking around with the boyfriend of Patty Hearst, kills Leo Ryan. So that's the end of that legislation.
Wow.
And so now the San Francisco Chronicle eases off on its criticism of the People's Temple because all the people have died.
Right.
But according to this book, was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment, which is not totally proven, but it's very thorough scholarship, and it's quite plausible. Actually, it's known that people would line up every night and get a special cookie at Jonestown, all the people. So the idea is that in the cookie there was either drug A, drug B, or placebo. And the experiment was to see if either of the drugs would increase the likelihood of a person volunteering to commit suicide compared to placebo. And supposedly, of all the people who died at Jonestown, only maybe about half or a little more than half, at most, actually committed suicide. The rest were actually all shot.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a combination of mass murder, suicide. And several members of the Leighton family were evacuated from Jonestown by the CIA station chief in that South American country in the week prior to the mass suicide.
So it doesn't seem that it was...
Right. It doesn't seem
unrelated.
Exactly unrelated or random. And one of the people who survived Jonestown is a man named Mark Lane, who wrote a lot of books about the Kennedy assassination, saying it was a conspiracy, basically. So he escaped Jonestown and got back to the United States in a very harried and hassled frame of mind.
Sure.
Immediately before he had to testify at the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which concluded that the Kennedy assassination was not, in fact, a lone gunman. So there's all these like strange kind of connections in this huge web, but it just for it all to be random.
Right. Certainly. And so you have documented all of this in your book, The CIA Doctors, correct?
Some, but not all of that story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then where, obviously the book you just mentioned, but are there other places you could recommend that people look if they wanted to learn more about the specific incident?
There's been a whole series of articles about it in Freedom magazine, over the years, but that would be in the archives of Freedom Magazine. So you could contact Freedom Magazine and ask them, which is just Google Freedom Magazine. It's not hard to find. And they've done, Tom Whittle's the editor there. He's done a lot of very thorough investigation for many decades now, and a series of papers and articles.
So this situation where, as you've noted, there's just so many different kind of links and correlations, and this guy that's connected to this guy, would you say that this is kind of an isolated incident for the CIA and different CIA operatives to be involved in all these different ways, or is this something that's
I'd say
common among the research you've
business
done?
as usual, I would say.
Okay. Because I know in our previous videos where we've discussed CIA mind control, it's almost very reminiscent of this, where you have this guy and then, it turns out that he's a CIA agent. And, once you start putting the pieces together, it does create what I guess some people might call a conspiracy theory. But as you've noted, it's almost just uncanny that all of these things could just be coincidence.
Right. And in a court of law, people can get convicted of murder when the body hasn't been located yet. People quite regularly get convicted of crimes based entirely on circumstantial evidence. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a high threshold of proof. Right. So when you have this huge set of links with all these people connected together, the first argument is it's too much to be coincidence. Mm-hmm. And if it's not coincidence, then somebody's planned it out, and therefore it is a conspiracy. And in any case, it's not really a crazy conspiracy theory to accuse the CIA of conspiracy, because that's their job.
Right.
That's what they do all the time.
That's a really good point.
They wouldn't, point. If they didn't conspire in secret, they wouldn't be doing their job.
Right.
So they have to be conspiring.
Right.
Otherwise, we should just close them down. They're not doing their job.
Exactly. And so the question would be, are they, the different things that they are conspiring on, are these really things that are, towards improving the intelligence that's going to help our country and protect our country, protect our citizens? Or is it, activity that's, certainly in the case of CIA mind control, putting the citizens not only at risk, but in many cases, taking their lives from them?
Right. So the rationale is we're protecting national security. But I think the problem is some of the time, quite a bit of the time, that these operations are actually undermining freedom and democracy, undermining the integrity of America, and there's going to be a lot of blowback at some point or other.
So, in your opinion, is it a situation where you get these different CIA operatives and they're just kind of these rogue guys that end up going and doing something really, horrific? Or does it kind of look like, certainly in the case of the CIA documents, here we actually have documentation that's being handed down from the higher ups. Again, is that something that looks like a rogue incident where these guys actually go out and then they're responsible for people's murder or things like this?
I would say 9 times out of 10, the rogue incident is just a cover story. It's all operations most of the time. And again, if there's all these rogue incidents going on, then what kind of internal security are we talking about?
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
And I personally don't believe that the level of dysfunction and lack of security is that high.
Right.
I hope it isn't.
One would surely hope. Well, Dr. Ross, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to future videos with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video interesting. Be sure to leave us a comment and let us know your thoughts about what we've discussed here today. And if you have any requests or questions that you'd like to see us cover in future videos. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit us at thetruthtalks.net. Until next time, I'm Psyche Truth correspondent Karina Rachel. Thank you so much for watching.